Listen closely to what I'm about to tell you, because this is a story that will shake you to your core. Imagine standing in a courtroom at 12 years old, your hands trembling, your voice breaking, as you point at the woman who destroyed your childhood. Imagine the weight of 5 years of silence pressing down on your chest, the shame, the fear, the nights you cried yourself to sleep wondering if anyone would ever believe you. This is Chidi's story. A 7-year-old boy whose innocent smile was stolen by the one person his parents trusted most. The nanny who called him "my special boy" while she committed unspeakable acts behind locked doors. Welcome back to NK's Tales. This is the story of how wealth couldn't protect him, how parental love wasn't enough, and how one boy's nightmare became a family's awakening. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change how you trust people with your children. Even the most trusted. Picture the Benedict home in Lekki Phase 1, Lagos. Gleaming marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured lawns, luxury cars in the driveway. Everything money could buy, everything success could build. Inside this palace of privilege lived a family that looked perfect from the outside. Mrs. Addis Benedict, one of Lagos's most formidable corporate lawyers, the woman who never lost a case, who commanded boardrooms with her presence, who wore power suits like armor. Her husband, Emeka, an executive at one of Nigeria's top oil companies, the kind of man whose signature moved millions, whose connections opened doors, whose name carried weight. And their son, Chidi. 7 years old, with eyes that sparkled with curiosity, hands that created beautiful drawings, a gentle soul who preferred books to football, who asked questions about everything, who still believed the world was good. But perfection is often a mask, and in the Benedict household, success had a price. Addis left the house at 6 every morning, returned at 9 every night, her mind always 3 steps ahead in her cases, her phone perpetually buzzing with urgent matters that couldn't wait. Emeka traveled constantly, Port Harcourt 1 week, Abuja the next, international conferences that pulled him across continents. And Chidi learned early that his parents' love came wrapped in expensive gifts and apologies. Birthday parties with hired entertainers but parents too busy to attend. School events where other children's parents cheered while Chidi searched the crowd for faces that never came. A bedroom filled with every toy imaginable but empty of the presence he craved most. Addis felt the guilt like a stone in her chest. Every morning she kissed Chidi's forehead and promised to be home early, knowing she wouldn't be. Every night she came home to find him already asleep, his dinner eaten alone, his homework completed without her help. She told herself she was building a future for him, that her sacrifices would give him opportunities she never had. But late at night, when sleep wouldn't come, she wondered if she was trading his childhood for her career. She wondered if he would remember her as the mother who was never there. That's when the idea came. A nanny. Not just any nanny, but someone special, someone who could give Chidi the attention she couldn't provide, someone who would love him like family. She asked around her network, put out feelers among her colleagues, and that's when Mrs. Chidinma, a senior partner at her firm, recommended someone extraordinary. Her name was Blessing. 24 years old, trained in early childhood care, with references that glowed like testimonials. She had worked for 2 prominent families in Victoria Island, both of whom praised her dedication, her warmth, her almost maternal instinct with children. She's not just a nanny, Mrs. Chidinma said. She's a godsend. Your son will love her. The day Blessing arrived, Addis felt her anxiety lift for the first time in months. Blessing stood in their living room, a sweet-looking young lady with a gentle smile, her voice soft and reassuring. She knelt down to Chidi's level, looked him in the eyes, and said, "Hello, my special boy. We are going to be great friends, you and I." Chidi, shy at first, warmed to her quickly. She asked about his drawings, admired his toy collection, listened with genuine interest as he explained the intricate world he'd built with his action figures. By the end of that first day, Chidi was holding her hand, showing her his favorite hiding spots in the house, giggling at her jokes. Addis watched this connection form and felt relief wash over her. Finally, someone who truly cared for her son. Finally, she could focus on her cases without the crushing guilt. The first few weeks were everything Addis had hoped for. Blessing was punctual, organized, attentive. She prepared nutritious meals that Chidi actually ate. She helped with homework, making learning fun with games and songs. She took him to the park, read him bedtime stories, and kept the house immaculate. Addis would come home to find Chidi bathed, fed, happy. The boy seemed to flourish under Blessing's care. His teachers commented on his improved mood, his increased participation in class. Even Emeka, usually oblivious to household dynamics, noticed the positive change. "You made the right choice," he told Addis one evening. "That woman is worth more than gold." But then came the moment that should have been a warning. Addis came home early one Thursday, a rare occurrence when her afternoon meeting was cancelled. She climbed the stairs, intending to surprise Chidi, and found his bedroom door closed. Not just closed, but locked from the inside. She knocked, called out, and heard scrambling inside, hushed voices, the sound of movement. When Blessing finally opened the door, her smile was tight, her breathing slightly elevated. "Oh, Mrs. Benedict, I didn't hear you come in. We were just finishing Chidi's bath." Addis looked at her son, already in his pajamas, his hair damp, his eyes not quite meeting hers. Something felt off, a discordant note in an otherwise perfect melody. "Why was the door locked?" she asked. Blessing's laugh was light, dismissive. "Oh, you know how children are, Ma. Chidi likes his privacy during bath time now. He's growing up, becoming modest. I was just respecting his boundaries." The explanation made sense, didn't it? Boys at 7 did start developing a sense of privacy, didn't they? Addis pushed down her unease, told herself she was being paranoid, overprotective. But that night, she lay awake wondering why Chidi had seemed nervous when she arrived. Wondering why Blessing had insisted on bathing him alone when 7 was old enough for supervised independence. Wondering why she felt this knot of anxiety in her stomach that wouldn't dissolve. By morning, she had convinced herself she was overthinking. Blessing had been nothing but perfect. The references had been impeccable. Mrs. Chidima trusted her. Addis was just feeling guilty about her absence, projecting her inadequacies onto an innocent woman who was doing her job beautifully. She didn't know that behind that locked door, in those moments before she knocked, Blessing had been teaching Chidi that his body wasn't his own. That under the guise of bathing him, she had been touching him in ways that made his stomach hurt, that made him want to cry, but her hand was over his mouth, that made him feel dirty and confused and scared. She didn't know that Blessing had whispered in his ear, "This is our special game, remember? All nannies play this with their boys. But if you tell your mother, she'll think you're bad. She'll send you away. Is that what you want?" Chidi had shaken his head, tears streaming down his face, his voice stolen by fear and shame. "Good boy," Blessing had said, her tone sickly sweet. "Now let's get you dressed before your mother gets suspicious." What Addis also didn't know was that this wasn't the first time. The grooming had started weeks earlier, so subtly that even Chidi hadn't recognized it as wrong at first. It began with Blessing telling him he was special, different from other children, more mature, more understanding. She brought him extra treats, sweets she said were just between us, creating a secret world where Chidi felt chosen, important. Then came the excessive physical affection, hugs that lasted too long, kisses on the lips instead of the cheek, her hands lingering on his body in ways that made him uncomfortable, but she always laughed it off. "Don't be silly, my special boy. I'm just showing you love. Don't you want to make me happy?" The manipulation was masterful, calculated, predatory. Blessing isolated him emotionally, planting seeds of doubt about his parents. "Your mother is always working, never here for you. Your father doesn't even know your favorite color. But I know everything about you. I'm the only one who really cares. Chidi, hungry for attention, desperate for someone to see him, fell into her trap. By the time the touching became explicitly sexual, he was already conditioned to accept it as normal, as proof of love, as something he owed her for her care. She framed it as education, as preparation for adulthood, as their special secret that proved how mature and trusted he was. The shame took root immediately. Chidi knew, even without the words to explain it, that something was profoundly wrong. His body told him through the pain, the fear, the way his stomach turned when he heard Blessing's footsteps approaching his room. But she had convinced him that telling would mean losing everything. His mother would hate him. His father would call him a liar. He would be sent away to boarding school or worse. And wasn't this love? Didn't she always say she loved him while she hurt him? Maybe this was what love felt like, and his confusion was his own failure to understand adult affection. 6 months passed, and Chidi transformed. The bright-eyed boy who asked endless questions became quiet, withdrawn, speaking only when spoken to. His artwork, once filled with vibrant colors and happy scenes of family and adventure, turned dark. He drew figures with no faces, houses with bad windows, children crying in corners. His teacher, Mrs. Folek, noticed but attributed it to a phase, perhaps stress from his parents' busy schedules. She mentioned it casually to Addis during pickup one day. Chidi seems a bit subdued lately. Is everything okay at home? Addis, juggling her phone and car keys, distracted by an incoming call from the office, responded with practiced cheerfulness. Oh, everything's wonderful. We have an amazing nanny now. He's just adjusting to the routine. She didn't see Mrs. Folek's concerned frown, didn't catch the unspoken worry in her teacher's eyes. At home, new behaviors emerged that should have been alarm bells but were dismissed as childhood regression. Chidi started bedwetting again, something he hadn't done since he was 4. Addis bought waterproof mattress covers and reminded him to use the bathroom before bed. He began having nightmares, waking up screaming, but when asked what scared him, he would just shake his head and hide under his covers. Bad dreams, Addis soothed, not knowing those dreams were memories. He flinched when adults touched him unexpectedly, pulled away from hugs, tense during bath time when his parents were home. He's becoming independent, Emeka observed, missing entirely the terror in his son's eyes. Blessing's control tightened like a noose. She monitored his every interaction, hovered during phone calls with his parents when they traveled, coached him on what to say and what to hide. She had perfected the art of public performance, the doting nanny who lived for Chidi's well-being, who sacrificed her own comfort for his happiness. In front of the Benedicts, she was sunshine and dedication. Alone with Chidi, she was something else entirely. A monster who had learned to wear a human face, who could switch between tenderness and terror in seconds, who used his confusion and fear as weapons to ensure his silence. The abuse escalated in frequency and severity. What had started as inappropriate touching evolved into acts that left Chidi in physical pain, that required him to shower for long periods trying to feel clean, that made him hate his own body for betraying him with reactions he didn't understand. Blessing's threats became more explicit. If you tell, I'll say you're lying. Who do you think they'll believe? The helpful nanny who takes care of everything, or the troubled little boy who wets his bed and has nightmares? They'll think you're crazy. They'll send you away to one of those places for bad children. Chidi believed her because what else could he do? At 7, then 8 years old, she was his entire world when his parents were absent. She controlled his food, his routine, his reality. Saying no wasn't an option. Fighting back wasn't possible. Silence was survival. His one attempt to tell changed everything. He was 8 years old, had been enduring the abuse for over a year, and something inside him broke just enough to let hope peek through. His mother was home for a rare Saturday afternoon, no business calls, no emergencies pulling her away. They were in the kitchen, Addis making tea, and Chidi gathered every ounce of courage he possessed. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. His hands shook. His voice came out small, hesitant. "Mommy, I need to tell you something about Auntie Blessing." Addis looked up from her teacup, smiled at him with that distracted smile he knew so well. "What is it, sweetheart? Is she not giving you enough vegetables? I know you hate those, but they are important." Chidi tried again, his voice cracking. "No, Mommy. It's that I don't like when Auntie Blessing." That's when her phone rang. That's when the opportunity died. Addis glanced at the screen, her expression shifting to business mode. "Oh, Chidi, I'm so sorry, but I have to take this. It's the Henderson case. I've been waiting for this call all week. We'll talk later, okay? Just be good for Auntie Blessing. You know how lucky we are to have her." She answered the phone and walked out of the kitchen, her voice already shifting to her professional tone, leaving Chidi standing there with his unspoken truth dying in his throat. He had tried. He had been brave. And the world had told him that his pain was less important than a business call. The message was clear: he didn't matter enough. That night, when Blessing came to his room and found him crying, she knew immediately what had happened. She had been listening from the hallway, had heard his attempt, had watched it fail. Her smile was cruel as she sat on his bed, as she wiped his tears with false tenderness. "See? I told you they don't care. I told you they wouldn't listen. You're nothing to them but a burden they pay me to handle. But you tried to betray me, didn't you? You tried to tell our secret. That was very, very bad." The punishment that followed wasn't physical, not in ways that would leave visible marks. Blessing was too smart for that. Instead, she withheld affection, spoke to him coldly, made him feel as if he'd lost the only person who loved him. She took away his favorite foods, gave him smaller portions, told him bad boys didn't deserve treats. She isolated him further, didn't take him to the park anymore, and kept him in his room for hours. And when she finally came back to him with warmth, when she finally touched him again with that sickening gentleness, he was so desperate for any form of connection that he accepted it. Accepted the abuse as the price of not being completely alone. She had broken something fundamental in him, the ability to trust his own instincts, to believe in rescue, to hope that anyone would choose him over their own priorities. His father was no better. Emeka came home from a 3-week trip to Port Harcourt, noticed Chidi's withdrawn demeanor, and attributed it to typical childhood moods. "What's wrong with you, boy? Why so quiet? Are you not grateful for everything we provide? That woman upstairs takes better care of you than most children get. Show some appreciation." Chidi wanted to scream, wanted to grab his father and shake him and make him see, but the words wouldn't come. They were trapped behind a wall of fear and shame so thick that no sound could penetrate. So he nodded, said yes, Daddy, and went back to his room where Blessing was waiting with that smile that promised more pain disguised as love. Even his grandmother, who visited one Sunday afternoon, sensed something was terribly wrong. Grandma Neoma had raised 8 children, had eyes that missed nothing, had instincts sharpened by decades of reading people. She watched Chidi throughout the visit, noticed how he stuttered at sudden movements, how he positioned himself as far from Blessing as possible, how his eyes had lost their light. After dinner, she pulled Addis aside. "Something is wrong with that child. His spirit is troubled. I can see it." Addis, exhausted from a brutal week at work, felt her defenses rise. "Mama, nothing is wrong. He's just growing up, becoming more reserved. It's a phase." But Neoma wouldn't be dismissed. "I know what I see, Addis. I know troubled spirits. That boy is carrying something heavy, and you're too blind to see it." The accusation stung, and made Addis angry. "With all due respect, Mama, I know my son. He has everything he needs. We're providing for him better than most parents could dream of. Maybe you're seeing problems that don't exist. The conversation ended there, tension hanging between them, but Grandma Neoma's words planted a seed. Not enough to make Addis investigate, not enough to break through her denial, but enough to make her watch Chidi more carefully. She noticed the bedwetting hadn't stopped. She noticed he no longer played with his toys. She noticed he never smiled anymore when Blessing entered the room. But every time doubt crept in, she pushed it away with logic. Blessing was perfect. The references were solid. Mrs. Chidima trusted her. Chidi was just going through an adjustment. She was being paranoid. Everything was fine. Everything had to be fine because if it wasn't, that meant she had failed him. That meant her choices, her career, her absence had cost her son something irreplaceable. And that possibility was too painful to face. Meanwhile, Blessing overheard that conversation. She heard Grandma Neoma's suspicions, she felt the first flutter of anxiety that her perfect cover might crack. So she escalated her manipulation, became even more attentive in front of the family, even more loving in public displays. She hugged Chidi constantly when others were watching, called him her special boy loud enough for everyone to hear, and performed affection like a Broadway show. And in private, she tightened her grip. Your grandmother is trying to take me away from you. She wants to separate us. If she succeeds, you have no one. Your parents will hire someone who doesn't care about you at all, someone cruel. Is that what you want? Chidi, terrified of any change that might make things worse, shook his head. He had learned that the devil you know is safer than the unknown. A year passed. Then another. Chidi turned 8, then 9, and the light that had once defined him was completely extinguished. He moved through life like a ghost, present but not alive, breathing but not living. His teachers noticed but had given up on getting answers. His parents noticed but had convinced themselves it was normal development. His friends noticed and stopped inviting him to play because he never responded, never smiled, never engaged. He became invisible in plain sight, a boy disappearing inside his own trauma while the world continued around him, oblivious or unwilling to see. But there was someone who saw. Someone whose own history made her recognize the signs that others missed. Her name was Hugo, and she was about to become the catalyst that would finally shatter Chidi's silence. If you've made it this far, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because stories like this need to be heard. They need to be shared. They need to wake us up to the horrors that happen behind closed doors, in homes that look perfect from the outside. And here's my question for you, how many signs did Chidi's parents miss? How many warnings did they ignore? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because we need to talk about this. Hugo had been working as a housemaid in the Benedict household for 3 months before she realized what was happening to Chidi. She was 28 years old, quiet by nature, the kind of person who blended into the background so effectively that people forgot she was there. She cleaned the downstairs areas, did the laundry, prepared meals when Blessing was busy with Chidi, and kept her head down. In a household like the Benedicts, where status and education determined your worth, a housemaid learned quickly to be invisible, to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to never offer opinions unless asked. Hugo had perfected this art over 10 years of domestic work, moving from house to house, seeing the intimate lives of the wealthy while remaining forever apart from their world. But Hugo carried her own scars, wounds that had never quite healed, a past that made her sensitive to suffering others might overlook. When she was 12 years old, growing up in a small village in Owerri, her mother had died of malaria. Her father, overwhelmed with 5 children and no means to support them, had sent Hugo to Lagos to live with her aunt. The aunt, a trader in Balogun Market, had taken her in not out of love but utility. Hugo became free labor, a child servant in her own relative's home. And her aunt's husband, a man whose smile he'd wrought, had noticed the young girl with no protection, no one to defend her. The abuse had lasted 3 years, from age 12 to 15, until Hugo finally found the courage to run away. She had told her aunt what was happening, hoping for rescue, only to be called a liar, a troublemaker, a wicked girl trying to destroy a good man's reputation. Her aunt had beaten her for the accusation, locked her in a room, told her she was lucky anyone had taken her in at all. That night, Hugo had climbed out a window and disappeared into Lagos's vast anonymity. She had survived through domestic work, had learned to trust no one, had built walls around her heart so high that nothing could hurt her again. But those walls hadn't made her blind to suffering. If anything, they had given her vision to see what others missed, to recognize the signs of abuse in another's eyes because she knew them in her own mirror. She had noticed Chidi immediately. Not because he was loud or obvious, but because of his silence. The kind of silence that screams if you know how to listen. She noticed how he flinched when Blessing touched him, the tiny recoil that others dismissed as startled surprise but Hugo recognized as learned fear. She noticed how he never smiled at Blessing despite the nanny's constant affection, how his body went rigid when they were alone together, how his eyes held the same haunted emptiness that Hugo remembered from her own teenage years. She noticed the locked bedroom door, the lengthy bath times, the way Blessing monopolized every moment of Chidi's life while presenting it as devotion. For weeks, Hugo said nothing. What could she say? She was a housemaid, uneducated beyond primary school, with no proof, no evidence, just instinct and traumatic recognition. Who would believe her over Blessing, the perfect nanny with impeccable references? Who would listen to her accusations against a woman Mrs. Benedict praised constantly? Hugo had learned long ago that people of her status weren't believed, especially when accusing their betters. She would be fired, probably blacklisted, definitely blamed for causing trouble. And for what? Because she thought she saw something. Because a boy was quiet. She convinced herself to stay silent, to mind her business, to protect herself first. But then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The house was quiet because Mrs. Benedict was at work and Mr. Benedict was traveling. Hugo was cleaning the upstairs hallway, moving quietly as always, when she heard something from Chidi's room. A sound that froze her blood. A child's whimper, quickly muffled, followed by Blessing's voice low and threatening. Hugo moved closer to the door, her heart pounding, and heard Blessing say, "Stop crying. You know what happens when you cry. Do you want me to tell your mother how bad you've been? How you touch me inappropriately? They'll send you to juvenile prison. Is that what you want?" Hugo stood outside that door, her hand raised to knock, her whole body shaking with rage and recognition. This was it. This was the moment she had suspected, confirmed now beyond doubt. A child was being abused on the other side of this door, and she had two choices. She could walk away, protect herself, pretend she had nothing. Or she could risk everything, knowing that speaking up could cost her job, her reference, her ability to work in this city. She thought about her own 12-year-old self, crying into a pillow while her aunt's husband did unspeakable things, wishing someone, anyone, would save her. She thought about how silence had protected her abuser for years, how her aunt's disbelief had condemned her to ongoing torture. She thought about Chidi's empty eyes, his ghost-like presence, his stolen childhood. She knocked on the door, loud and deliberate. The sounds inside stopped immediately. Scrambling, hushed urgency, Blessing's sharp intake of breath. When the door finally opened, Blessing's face was composed but her eyes were wild, defensive. "Yes, Hugo. Is there something you need?" Chidi sat on his bed, his pajama pants askew, his face stained, his whole body trembling. Hugo looked at him, then at Blessing, and made her choice. "Madam say I should help give Chidi a bath today. That I should take over some of your duties so you can rest." It was a lie, one that came smoothly despite her pounding heart. Blessing's jaw tightened. "That won't be necessary. I have everything under control." Chidi and I have our routine. But Hugo didn't back down. Madam insisted, more. She says you work too hard. That you need a break sometimes. The standoff lasted seconds that felt like hours. Blessing couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious, couldn't argue without revealing her need for private access to Chidi. Finally, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she nodded. Of course. How kind of Mrs. Benedict to think of my well-being. Chidi, be good for Auntie Hugo, you hear. She left the room, but not before giving Chidi a look that promised consequences for whatever he might say. Hugo closed the door and sat on the bed beside Chidi, giving him space, not crowding him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, softly, in a voice barely above a whisper, Hugo said, I know. 2 words. That's all it took. Chidi's head snapped up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time, and she saw the desperate hope there, the terrified prayer that someone finally saw him. I know what she's doing to you, Hugo continued. And I believe you. I believe you because someone did the same thing to me when I was your age. And no one believed me either. The dam broke. Chidi started crying, not the quiet tears he'd learned to hide, but great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. Hugo pulled him into her arms, held him while he cried, didn't ask questions, didn't push. She just held him and let him release years of pain he'd been forbidden to express. When the tears finally slowed, when his breathing evened out, she spoke again. You don't have to tell me everything now. You don't have to tell me anything if you're not ready. But I want you to know something very important. What she's doing to you is not your fault. It's not because you're bad or because you did something wrong. It's because she's a bad person who hurts children. Do you understand? Chidi nodded, his voice raspy from crying. But she said if I tell, no one will believe me. She said they'll think I'm lying. She said they'll send me away. Hugo felt rage burn in her chest, the familiar anger at predators who used fear as chains. She said that because she's scared. She's scared that if people know the truth, she'll go to prison where she belongs. But here's what I need you to know, Chidi. I'm going to help you. I'm going to make sure people believe you. But I need you to be brave a little bit longer. Can you do that? From that day forward, Hugo became a silent guardian. She changed her schedule to be upstairs more often, always finding reasons to interrupt Blessing and Chidi's alone time. She started documenting patterns, writing down in a small notebook every time Blessing took Chidi to his room and locked the door, how long they were in there, what time it happened. She befriended Chidi slowly, building trust through small kindnesses, an extra piece of meat in his rice, a juice box slipped into his bag, moments of normalcy in his nightmare existence. She never pushed him to talk about the abuse, understanding that healing couldn't be forced, that trust was rebuilt slowly, moment by moment. But Hugo's presence had unintended consequences. Blessing sensed the shift, the new obstacle to her unfettered access. She began treating Hugo with thinly veiled hostility, complaining to Mrs. Benedict that the housemaid was overstepping her duties, interfering with the nanny's work. That girl is always hovering, madam. She's making Chidi uncomfortable, disrupting our routine. I don't think it's healthy for him to have too many people trying to parent him. Adiz, trusting Blessing implicitly, spoke to Hugo. Please focus on your downstairs duties. Blessing handles everything related to Chidi. We don't need confusion about roles. Hugo had no choice but to appear compliant, but she found ways to maintain her watchfulness. She learned Blessing's patterns, knew when the nanny would be occupied, used those windows to check on Chidi. She couldn't stop the abuse entirely, didn't have the authority or evidence yet to make formal accusations, but her presence reduced the frequency, made Blessing more cautious. It wasn't enough, it would never be enough, but it was something. It was a crack in the predator's armor, a signal to Chidi that he wasn't completely alone. Meanwhile, Chidi's condition continued to deteriorate. At 9 years old, he had the eyes of someone much older, someone who had seen too much, endured too much. His school performance plummeted. His teacher, Mrs. Folake, called another meeting with his parents, this time more insistent. "Mr. and Mrs. Benedict, I'm genuinely concerned about Chidi. He's not just withdrawn anymore. He's showing signs of depression. His artwork has become disturbing, violent themes that aren't normal for his age. He doesn't interact with other children. Last week, he became aggressive with a female teacher who tried to help him. He pushed her away forcefully. This isn't typical behavior. I really think you should consider child psychology." For the first time, Addis felt real fear pierce her denial. Depression. Disturbing artwork. Aggressive behavior. These weren't phases or adjustments. These were red flags she could no longer ignore. She scheduled an appointment with a child psychologist, Dr. Amoka Obi, a woman with 30 years of experience working with traumatized children. But before the appointment, she made a critical mistake. She told Blessing about it, explaining that they were concerned about Chidi's behavior and wanted professional insight. Blessing's reaction was immediate and masterful. She expressed deep concern, said she had noticed similar issues, had been worried herself but didn't want to overstep. Then she began planting seeds. "You know, Mrs. Benedict, children sometimes fabricate stories when they are going through difficult phases. My training covered this. They might say things that aren't true, especially if they are seeking attention or trying to understand complex emotions. I just want you to be prepared, in case he says something unexpected during his sessions. The psychologist will know how to handle it, but I'd hate for you to be blindsided by attention-seeking behavior." The manipulation was brilliant and devastating. Blessing had just preemptively discredited anything Chidi might say, framed future disclosures as lies before they were even spoken. And Addis, still trusting this woman implicitly, absorbed the warning. When they arrived at Dr. Obi's office the following week, Addis' guard was already up, her skepticism activated, ready to dismiss her son's words as attention-seeking fabrication rather than desperate truth. The session didn't go as anyone expected. Dr. Obi, experienced in creating safe spaces for children, set up play therapy scenarios, used dolls and drawings to help Chidi express what words couldn't capture. For the first 30 minutes, Chidi was silent, unresponsive, locked behind walls that years of abuse had built. Then Dr. Obi asked him to draw his family. Chidi drew 4 figures. His mother and father standing far apart, distant and small. Himself in the middle, alone, drowning in black scribbles. And Blessing, huge and looming, with sharp teeth and claws for hands, standing over his figure with red crayon dripping like blood. Dr. Obi's expression remained neutral, professional, but her heart rate accelerated. This was textbook trauma artwork, the kind that screamed abuse. She asked gently, "Chidi, can you tell me about this drawing? Why does this person have sharp teeth?" Chidi's voice was barely audible. "Because she hurts me. Every day. In my room. When no one else is there." The admission hung in the air, fragile and enormous. Dr. Obi leaned forward slightly. "How does she hate you, Chidi? Can you show me the dolls?" That's when Addis interrupted. Her voice was sharp, defensive, denial rowing to protect her from the truth she couldn't bear to face. "Chidi, what are you saying? Auntie Blessing doesn't hurt you. She takes wonderful care of you." "Dr. Obi, I think this is exactly what I was warned about. He's going through a phase, making up stories for attention." But Dr. Obi had seen this reaction 1,000 times before. The parent who couldn't accept what their child was revealing, who chose comfort over truth. She raised her hand gently but firmly. "Mrs. Benedict, I need you to wait outside, please. I need to speak with Chidi alone." "Absolutely not. I'm his mother. I have every right." "Mrs. Benedict." Dr. Obi's voice was still wrapped in velvet. If you want to help your son, you will step outside. Now. Something in the psychologist's tone, the absolute certainty there, made Adi's protest die in her throat. She stood, her legs unsteady, and walked out of the room. Through the door, she could hear nothing but the hammering of her own heart. Inside, Dr. Obi turned back to Chidi with infinite patience. Chidi, I need you to know something. I believe you. Whatever you tell me, I will believe you. And I promise you, nothing bad will happen to you for telling the truth. Do you understand? Chidi looked into her eyes, searching for the lie, the trap, the inevitable betrayal. But all he saw was steady compassion, the kind of unwavering presence he'd been starving for. And slowly, painfully, the words began to come. He used the doors. He showed her what blessing did behind locked doors. He described the touching, the threats, the pain, the confusion. He told her about trying to tell his mother and being interrupted by a phone call. He told her about the locked bathroom, the special games, the promises that this was love. Each word was agony, each admission felt like betraying the only person who paid attention to him, even if that attention was poisonous. But once the dam cracked, the truth poured out like a flood that had been held back too long. Dr. Obi maintained her professional composure, but inside she was screaming. Another child. Another predator who had hidden in plain sight. Another family that had missed the signs because they were too busy, too trusting, too unwilling to believe that monsters don't always look like monsters. When Chidi finished, exhausted and trembling, she held his hands gently. You were so brave to tell me. What happened to you was not your fault. Say it with me, it was not my fault. It was not my fault, Chidi whispered, and began to cry again.